The Puma Fast-R Nitro Elite 3, without a doubt, one of the most hyped shoes that I can remember, at least in the past couple years. And now that we're post Boston, which was kind of the big debut of this shoe for the Project 3 athletes and just in the marketplace, the reviews of this shoe have been pretty positive overall, which is really interesting to see. It's quite good, actually. Now, this video is not a review of this shoe. I've not run in the Fast-R 3. I'm not a Project 3 member. I don't own the shoe. Instead, this is going to be a technical and design analysis of both a couple things about the shoe from a design standpoint that are interesting to talk about, and let's talk about some of the claims Puma is making with this shoe. Now, as I said, this is not a review. I don't own the shoe, and I've said previously in videos that I'm not interested in running the shoe. But the more I've dug into this shoe and the more I've looked at it, the more I've read the reviews, I'm kind of interested. I am kind of interested in running in this shoe. I'm not committing to it because here in Taiwan, this is a shoe that I probably will never see at retail. I think I saw the Fast-R 2 once. It's a shoe that's not really here in large quantities. So I will see what I can do. It's also an expensive shoe for me to go purchase for something that I don't think is going to work for me particularly well, and I'll talk about why in this video. So Puma, if you're watching and you want to send me a pair to actually review and really get into and feel the mojo of the shoe, by all means, there's an email in my channel. Let's talk. Otherwise, I will see what I can do at retail with this shoe, see if I can find a pair and maybe do a review on it. But again, I'm not committing to that. With that being said, let's get into the technical analysis. Starting with the design language and the overall aesthetics of this shoe, I think it's probably the best looking Puma that I've ever seen. And it's one of the best looking running shoes that I've seen in some time. It's a beautiful looking shoe, so great and kudos to them and the Puma design team for doing that. It's a beautiful refinement. The Fast-R 2 had all sorts of weird lines and the shark fin on the heel and just all that stuff on it. All that's gone now and you're left with a very simple, very elegant, very refined shoe that looks fast. Not that aesthetics matter for performance, but there's that saying that a shoe that looks fast will feel fast and you'll feel faster running in it. And this definitely seems like one of those shoes. From a spec standpoint, we're at 39 mil in the heel, 31 in the forefoot, giving you an 8 mil drop. This shoe has lost about 80 grams or about 2 ounces overall from the Fast-R 2, coming in at 167 grams or 5.89 ounces in the standard US men's size 9 reference size. That is huge. That alone makes this shoe much more competitive as far as top tier super shoes in the marathon space. And one of the biggest things I've read about the reviews of this shoe, especially from Project 3 members, is that you really do notice that weight change. And it's massive for this shoe. And I'm going to say that that must be great for those that ran in the FR2 into this shoe. The foam in this shoe is all the ATPU Nitro Elite foam, 100%. Similar to what was in the FR2. However, it's just, again, the midsole in this shoe is now a continuous midsole with a slight cutout in the midfoot to save weight. But overall, this foam is softer, more bouncy, more resilient, and again, a lot of people will comment how much better this foam feels. We still have the forked power plate, and it still has that elongated plate in front of the toe, which again gives this shoe that really kind of carbon snap off the toe. That's there to really help elongate the stride, especially in steady state running, which this is for marathon running, so you're running in steady state. And that's giving you the ability to really allow the shoe to kind of propel you forward. One of the things the Project 3 participants have talked about, the reviews that I've read about this shoe, is that the compressive foam and that plate going ahead of the toe make this shoe feel bouncy, but bouncing in a bouncing forward feel, not just bouncing up or just bouncing kind of uncontrollably. This shoe's always being very propulsive and bouncing you forward. And that's a combination of the foam and that cantilevered plate design in front of the toe. Really interesting design and technical solution there. And it's one that I'm actually curious to run in. It's a little bit better suited to stride runners, runners with longer strides. I'm more of a cadence runner, and I feel like that's something I'm going to trip over as I'm really picking up my cadence. But again, I want to try it out. And again, that cantilevered plate in front of the toe is something that we have seen other brands starting to play with as well. In some of the early Nike Alphafly 4 prototype leaked photos that we've seen, we saw them playing with that. We also saw ASICS doing it with their MZ Type 1/2 elite level super shoe. We saw some early versions of that shoe having that as well. Both shoes in the current leaks that we've seen don't have that, but it's interesting to see that other brands are playing with this same idea for their top tier marathon racing shoes. While this is a continuous midsole shoe, it does have a much more extreme heel bevel in this shoe. As you can see, the heel is pulled in a much more extreme way than it was even on the Nike Alphafly 3. I've read a couple reviews and some comments from some of the Project 3 members who are heel strikers, and they're all saying that once they got used to this shoe, they actually fell in love with it. They found that it worked extremely well for them. It absorbed their heel strike, and then it really rolled them forward, and that forefoot design with the cantilevered plate in front of the toe really just helped, again, elongate their stride and propel them forward, bounce them forward. So while this looks like it may not be a heel striking option, and I do think this shoe is really optimized to design around a very efficient forefoot strike, it does seem like a shoe that will work with some trial and error for some heel strikers and possibly some midfoot strikers. Though if you need any type of midfoot support, especially on the medial side, this shoe may not be the one for you. Overall, this seems like a significant upgrade to the Fast-R 2, and it adds really an elite level super shoe into the Puma running lineup above the Deviate Nitro Elite 3 that really is for that very elite runner who's got a very efficient form and is looking for the fastest option on marathon race day. That's exactly what Puma has delivered here, and this refinement into the Fast-R 3 really pushes it forward. However, and this is the thing that I really wanted to talk about, for the press release in this shoe, and I'll link to all of this stuff in the description of this video, Puma made some massive claims on this shoe. In fact, the biggest claim that stood out to me was that this shoe is over 3% more efficient than other super shoes. And that really put off a lot of alarm bells for me, because that is a huge, huge claim. So big that if it's true, we're going to see other elite runners sponsored by other brands run in this shoe. They're going to black it out and run in the shoe, because a 3% advantage in this current era of super shoes, where we've sort of plateaued at about a 1 to 1.5% upgrade from each generation of super shoes, jumping up to 3 and over 3 in some cases, and I'll get to that, is massive. And again, that's why I think we would see blacked out shoes from other non-Puma athletes in this shoe if it's actually true. But the more I dug into it, the more I realized, is it actually true? And to unpack that claim, we need to define what Puma is actually claiming. That 3% is a 3% improvement in running economy. So what is running economy? Well, running economy is the amount of energy a runner uses to maintain a given pace. Essentially a measure of how efficiently the body uses oxygen and energy while running at a steady state. The more economical a runner is, the less energy they require to cover the same distance. And what I was really curious about, because this wasn't referenced anywhere in the press release from Puma, was what was the test protocol done in this study to actually come up with this? Well, I actually found that because I found the study. Again, all this stuff will be linked in the description of this video, but the test protocol essentially was this. There were 15 participants, and they all warmed up as they would for a high-tempo workout. So probably this workout was between 5 and 10K pace for these athletes. They ran on a force measurement treadmill. They also had a mouthpiece and a mask on, which measured the expired air. That's how they're actually gauging the efficiency. They ran in 4 shoes, a pair of Nike Alphafly 3s, a pair of Adidas Evo 1s, the Fast-R 2 and the Fast-R 3. So each of the 15 participants ran in all 4 shoes for 5 minutes each, and they did that twice. So each participant ran around their 10K pace in each of the 4 shoes twice for about 5 minutes each in a lab. Pretty standard test protocol for this type of stuff. I think sometimes it could be a little bit longer. I think sometimes they might do a couple more reps. They may come back on different days and do it. But fundamentally, this wasn't some crazy test. This was a pretty standard test done to test a bunch of things for athletes and shoes. A couple key study points was that this study was funded by Puma at the Umass Integrative Locomotion Lab, and it was led by the same researcher who did the original Nike Super Shoe study back in 2017 that got the 4% mark. So it is the same researcher who did that, and the test protocol is very similar. So there is sort of a one-to-one. This is an apples-to-apples comparison to that original Nike study. As I've already said, there were 15 participants, 11 male, 4 female. They tested the 4 shoes, the Alpha Fly 3, the Evo 1, the Fast-R 2, and the Fast-R 3. And overall, some of the takeaways was that the Fast-R 3 overcomes that super shoe plateau that I've already talked about, that 1 to 1.5% plateau that we've seen over the past couple of years by an average of 3.42%. I'll show you where that number is coming from. And of the 15 participants, the researchers are saying that none of them ran with worse running economy. Even the worst responder in the participant set saw a 1% improvement in running efficiency. So overall, that sounds pretty good. Now, it does seem like a small sample size, and it was only done in a lab. So this is only done on a treadmill in sort of optimal conditions, at least in a lab with a mask on. How optimal can that be? One of the things I'm seeing from the early reviews of the Fast-R 3 was that it feels great on the treadmill or very controlled conditions like a treadmill, but once you get on the road, you need to really pay attention to the shoe. If it's really great pavement, straight, fast, smooth, it's a joy to run in. If you're on twisty stuff that's got very kind of choppy pavement, well, you need to really stay on top of the shoe. So I would be really curious to see this study done with people outside across a range of different surfaces and conditions that you would run into in a big city marathon. Let's look at the actual numbers now. So what the numbers are, that 3.42% is an average. As you can see here, here's a chart from the study that's showing the metabolic rate or overall running economy improvement of each of these shoes. And what it's saying is that the Fast-R 3 is 3.62% more efficient in running economy improvement than the Alpha Fly 3, 3.5% better than the Evo 1, and 3.15% better than the FR2. Again, you add those numbers together, you get an average. That's where 3.42% comes from. That's a big, big claim. And on paper, from the lab data, it sounds really promising. But in reality, as I've already pointed out, runners that took this off the treadmill onto the road are reporting that it can be a bit of a handful, and maybe that 3% gain out on the actual road isn't quite there. So what I figured I would look at is, now that we're post Boston, so we've seen a lot of runners race the Boston Marathon 2025 in the Fast-R 3, including some top Puma athletes. There were a few top 10s in both the men's and women's fields in the Fast-R 3 from Puma athletes. Let's look at their results and see where that aligns with this 3.42% running economy improvement. And here we are. Here are the 3 Puma athletes that finished in the top 10, respectively, in the men's and women's fields in the 2025 Boston Marathon. Rory Linkletter, Ryan Ford, and Annie Frisbee. And if you watched any of their post-race interviews, they've all commented on the conditions were nearly perfect, and the race felt like probably their best race that they've ever had. Additionally, they all commented on the Fast-R 3 shoe, that they believed it actually helped them achieve this time. So let's start with Rory. He had one of the best races he's ever had. In fact, it was a PB for him. In fact, each one of these athletes had a PB. So his finish time in the Boston Marathon was 2:07:02. He was 6th in the men's field. His prior PB was 2:08:01. That was at Seville in 24. Now that course is known to be extremely fast, extremely smooth. So that's a fast time. He bettered that at Boston. Now Boston is a course that is not eligible for World Athletics for PRs because it is a net downhill course. There are some hills at the end, but fundamentally it's a course that just has a lot of downhill. So it's not often considered the fastest course, but on a good weather day, which they had in 2025, it's considered a very fast course. And Rory's time here is a very fast time. So the actual difference or improvement in his PB was 59 seconds. So the actual percentage improvement is 0.7 or 0.77. Rory is a Puma athlete, so I'm going to give him the Puma time difference of 3.42. So based on what the Fast-R3 should have done, based on the claims from Puma and this study, Rory's time should have been 2:03:40. That should have been a 4-minute 21-second improvement. That's what 3.42% over his previous PB is. His actual percent difference is nowhere near that, and he commented that he had a race of a lifetime. Ryan Ford, 2:08 flat, 10th place in the 2025 Boston Marathon. His previous PR, and this was his marathon distance debut, was last year in New York City, 2:11:08. So the actual time difference in his PB here is 3 minutes, 8 seconds. So it's a 2.39% actual improvement. Now, that is much better. But Ryan is new to Puma. He ran New York City, I believe, in Alpha Flight 3. So I'm going to give him the 3.62 Puma time difference. So his Puma PB should have been 2:06:30. That would have been 4 minutes, 38 seconds. So 2.39 seconds is better, but it's still nowhere close to the 3.62%. And Annie Frisbee had 2:23:21, 8th place in the women's field. She commented in multiple post-race interviews that this was, again, a race of a lifetime. The PB that I could find for her was back in 2021 at New York City. She's kind of gone all over the place the past few years in the marathon. So this may not be an apples to apples comparison with that PB, but the actual time difference between her New York City 21 and the Boston Marathon 25 was 2 minutes 57 seconds. The actual percent difference is at 2.02%. Based on her being a Puma athlete, I'm going to give her the Puma time difference of 3.42%. So her Puma PB should have been 2:21:17, or about a 5-minute flat difference. Again, nowhere near that. I'm not pointing this out to throw any shade at those three runners. Again, they each had outstanding races. They commented how amazing of a race it actually was, how they felt like it was a race of a lifetime, and they felt like the Fast-R3 actually helped them achieve that time. But again, now that there's actual data to look at to back up the claims Puma's making with this study, I just thought it was interesting that none of these three athletes were anywhere close to actual that 3.42% or whichever rate is actually over 3% for them. Again, not throwing shade, it's just interesting to look at now real race data out on an open road and compare that to lab data and actually see where the difference is. And again, none of those athletes were even close to anything around 3%. Another interesting data point is the actual Puma Project 3 participants. Now, the Project 3 initiative was a program that Puma launched back in January to give about 100 runners, I believe, across both the Boston and London Marathon, or it could be 100 runners for each the Boston and London Marathon. The wording's not really clear, but give them that sort of elite level experience in the marathon, meaning give them kit, give them the elite sort of start field. They were provided with the Fast-R3 as the shoe to run in. Really actually cool program for those participating in it. And they were looking for faster, I believe, sub 2:20 marathoners generally on the men's side for this program. And Puma put out this post on their Instagram kind of propping this, the results for the Project 3 participants at Boston. Overall, cumulatively across all of the runners in Project 3 at the Boston Marathon 2025, they shaved 1 hour, 51 minutes, 41 seconds off of their collected PBs. That's pretty cool, but contextually, I don't really know what that means. Overall, from the participants, and again, I think there was around 100, maybe there was 50, I'm not sure, but 30 of them actually hit PBs across that. And then what's important there is that 15 of those PBs were over 3 minutes. And that's important because Puma gave out a $3,000 cash prize to any Project 3 participant who broke their PB by 3 minutes. So Puma actually paid out about $45,000 in bonuses for these 15 PBs, plus they paid another $3,000 for the fastest male and female Project 3 runners. So overall, Puma paid out $51,000 US to the Project 3 participants. So Puma did a really great program here. They're going to continue this in London. Props to Puma for this program, for this experience, for everything that they did here, and they should be showing this off. But again, I would really love to see all of the PB breakdowns here to see if any of them are within that 3% range. I'm going to leave you with this. The Fast-R 3 was not a shoe I was interested in. About a week ago, I said I did not want to run in it. But now, based on doing the design and technical review of the shoe, then looking at this data, I'm curious to experience this shoe for myself. I do want to see how good this shoe actually feels, because the reviews from the Project 3 members have been rather glowing. I haven't seen a negative one out there yet, though to be fair, I wouldn't expect to see a negative one either. That's going to be shared internally, not externally. And the reviews that I'm seeing from other shoe tubers on this shoe are all, for the most part, pretty positive. So overall, I think Puma has really nailed the shoe here. Is it the right shoe for me? I don't know, but I do want to experience it. I am now curious enough to want to try it out. So again, I'm going to look for it at retail, or Puma, if you've made it all this way, reach out to me. Let's figure something out and get me a pair of these shoes for me to actually go test on the channel. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you find this content useful, consider subscribing. You'll see more content from me pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.